Young children experience physiological arousal related to emotions like an upset stomach or a rise in body temperature, and they express their emotions, although not always in ways that make adults happy, but they have learning to do when it comes to the cognitive part. We will come back to this point later when we talk about emotion socialization at the end of the presentation. Erikson is one of the preeminent theorists when we're thinking about emotional development in young children. So he was what was considered to be a psychosocial theorist. So if you're thinking about psychoanalysts like Freud, that is the camp that we would put Erikson in. So he was interested in kind of the psychology and how that fits in with our social and emotional lives. And like Freud, he also looked at different stages that humans go through and how we manage those stages as we go across time. So for Erikson, he thought about sort of what is the dilemma that you need to solve at each stage of your life. What's the thing that you need to figure out, and how does that thing that you need to figure out meet with what society wants you to be doing? So for a toddler, they're trying to be autonomous when adults may not want them to be so autonomous, and so their desire to do things for themselves when they're little, and sometimes it's dangerous, sort of flies in the face of what adults would like them to be doing. So it's this tension between what developmental skill needs to be fleshed out and what the expectations of society are, and how society, our family, our friends, our teachers support us in our developmental needs and the things that we need to be working on as we move through these different stages. So again, Erikson is a stage theorist. He looks at these conflicts between biological drives and social expectations. You can see a breakdown of these stages on the next slide. So he was a life theorist. So he looked at humans from infancy until the time of their death, which is unusual. Most stage theorists stop when people get to be done with childhood, but Erikson's goes throughout the entire lifespan. And then another piece here is that depending on how these biological drives or these kinds of conflicts are resolved, also sets us up for how we're going to do developmentally in the future. So for babies, the primary task is to establish trust in themselves and with the world around them, or they might develop mistrust. If babies learn to develop trust, then they have good developmental outcomes and they tend to do well in later stages, whereas babies who have mistrust don't tend to do as well developmentally. So it really is important for adults and significant others in that child's life to help them manage those biological drives and to navigate these stages and these life conflicts well, so that they can move forward in a healthy way to the next conflict and they can do well developmentally. And then just to kind of finish off, in preschool, children are in the stage of initiative versus guilt. So on the next slide, you're going to see there's a whole list of stages. Like I said, Erikson is a lifespan theorist, but we are only going to be focusing in on initiative versus guilt because that's the only stage that matters to the developmental period that this class is covering. Infants and toddlers are very interested in doing things by themselves. A common refrain of 2-year-olds is me do it, I do it. So they like to try going up and down the stairs on their own, everything on their own, brushing their teeth, getting cereal for themselves, and obviously they're young and their skills aren't very defined yet, so they're not very good at some of these things. Sometimes they're downright dangerous. So it's definitely a challenge for parents to find the right balance of letting children try things and do things and have autonomy versus keeping them safe. So we need to be very careful at this stage to let children try things on their own while also protecting them and not making them feel shameful or scared or doubtful of their abilities. So it's kind of this tension between protecting children and letting them, try things out and develop those blossoming skills. So that is the main crisis for 2-year-olds. Parent response is vital when helping children to manage Erikson's stages. When a parent responds to children's developing skills with warmth and nurturance, they feel good about themselves and what they can do. When parents respond with negativity and doubt, children feel incapable and their self-esteem is lowered. When children enter the school age period, they don't just want to do things by themselves and do things by themselves without being asked, like our children in initiative versus guilt, but they also want to do things well. So for toddlers, they want to do things by themselves. For preschool age children, they want to do things without asking someone first or having somebody ask them first. But school age children want to do both of those things, and then again they want to do it at a certain standard. So they want to read well, and they want to play sports well, and they want to be good at things like big kids are. And so when they are not feeling successful in the things that they're trying, they're not able to achieve the benchmarks that they've set for themselves or the benchmarks that they see other kids are able to do, it makes them feel less than about themselves. It makes them feel inferior. So as teachers, as professionals who work with school-age children, as family members, we need to help children feel good about the things that they try and recognize that effort is important. It's not always just how you do something, but how you try at something, that we don't always do things exactly like someone else, so that we can help them to feel industrious, feel good about their skills and abilities and their efforts. This slide is looking at children's emotional understanding milestones, so what they understand about their own emotions, what they understand about the emotions of other people, and their new understanding that emotions can differ between people. This slide is related to milestones of emotional expression. So this would be how children express their emotions, learning to express emotions in socially appropriate kinds of ways, learning names for emotions, how to talk about your emotions. So this would be the external portion of emotional development. The milestones on this slide examine how children regulate their emotions, so how they control and respond to environmental stimuli, learning those social rules for what emotions are socially acceptable to express, how emotions should be expressed, keeping control over their emotions in situations where that might be necessary. So this is all about the emotions we feel and how we're able to regulate them in a social space. Emotional development is one of those areas where generally children's skills are just improving. So I did not separate out elementary school age milestones in emotional development into emotional understanding, expression, and regulation. As you can see, this slide covers across that age range and also covers across those different types of emotional development milestones. So for understanding, that would be, understanding those news stories that are distressing, expression would be, being empathetic towards others, using language to explore their thoughts and feelings. The regulation piece would be, being easily embarrassed or feeling distress when those things happen, maybe not being able to regulate their anxiety. So we see all three of those different types of emotional development accomplishments, but we've just captured them on one slide instead of three separate ones because development has slowed down a bit in this area. There are many factors that influence children's ability to exercise emotional regulation. Some are individual factors and some are environmental factors. So in terms of individual factors, when children are temperamentally difficult, they may find it more difficult to regulate themselves emotionally. Children who are temperamentally difficult tend to find sensory input more disturbing. They have a narrower range of sensory stimuli that they find acceptable, so they might be more bothered by loud noises, chaotic environments, flickering lights, uncomfortable clothing, and so therefore, because they are more prone to becoming upset by their sensory environment, it's just harder for them to regulate those emotions that are brought up by feeling uncomfortable in an uncomfortable sensory kind of place. Developmental stage is also part of that individual factor issue. So older children just are able to regulate emotions better. So if you think about the slide looking at the emotional regulation milestones, you can see that across time, children are just getting better developmentally at managing and regulating their emotions. So we know that part of those individual factors are just age, and that children will get better at these kinds of things over time. There are also environmental things that interfere with emotional regulation. So when children grow up in stressful environments, when there's a lot going on, when they're experiencing that kind of toxic stress or trauma or those adverse childhood experiences, if they're living in environments that are very chaotic, there's not a lot of routine, expectations are inconsistent, they're either too loose or too harsh, when parents are fighting a lot, when there's a lot of anger and tension and stress in the home, these are all things that can either damage the ability to emotionally regulate or interfere with it temporarily. So it's very important to help children have calm, stable social environments as much as we can. This is a great article from the Frank Porter Graham, which is an institute at the University of North Carolina, that gives a lot of good information. So the link on this page gives a lot of good information about what emotional regulation is, why it's important, how it develops, what it looks like at different ages. So just a great all-around article to give you more information about this topic. It's very important to help children develop their emotional skills, both in expression, understanding, and regulation. So there are 3 basic ways you can help children to get better emotional development skills, and also you can take these 3 ways of working with young children and apply them to social skills and all kinds of other skills. So particularly in that social emotional realm. So they don't just go with emotional development, but these socialization skills are definitely important in that arena in particular. So one way that adults can help children to build their emotional skills is to indirectly socialize them. So children pay attention to the kinds of things that we're doing. They pick up on the ways in which adults around them are expressing, managing, understanding emotions. So it's really important for us to behave in the way that we want children to behave, to be good at expressing our own emotions, to be kind and responsive to the emotions of people around us, to not be disparaging when somebody is feeling something different than we are, to be kind when you see someone who's having a hard time with emotional regulation, because children are looking at us. They're looking at how we're behaving and managing and doing different things in the world, and then they're determining how they should respond in kind. So that's the social referencing piece. So they both imitate us, do what we do, and they also look to us for guidance about how they should be responding in a particular situation. So if you drop your child off at preschool and you look uncomfortable and unhappy and stressed out and like it's not a good place to be, they're going to be watching you and picking up on those emotions that you're expressing, and then in turn they're probably not going to have a very good day because that's the message that they've gotten from you about that particular environment. Another thing that we can do is what's called expectancy communication. So talk with children ahead of time about how different situations might make them feel, strategies that they can use. The link on this page is a great article. It's about a research study done with children to show that children who kind of have a hard time managing things have a hard time kind of in the rest of their lives as well, and gives some great strategies for how to help children build their emotional regulation and emotional development skills. but talking with children, saying, sometimes when we go to new places, we might feel scared. What can we do to feel less scared? Or sometimes when you go to a party and somebody gets something that you wanted, you might feel angry or you might feel jealous. How can we handle that? Or you might be sad when you have to say goodbye to grandma because I know that you really like having her here. So talking ahead of time about what that emotional landscape might look like and how we can manage the feelings that might be brought forth in particular situations. And then we can also directly socialize children. So we can directly teach them skills that will help them to manage their emotions. So sometimes, unfortunately, we scold children. So when they are expressing or feeling a particular emotion, we tell them that's not okay and that they need to not be doing that. Better is to help them develop strategies to appropriately express the emotions that they're feeling. So we all feel angry, but how can we express that in a way that doesn't have us yelling at people or hitting them? What are some other things that we can do instead to manage those big emotions? So on the last slide, in a couple slides from now, we're going to talk about Ruler, which is a great teaching tool that's often used in early childhood classrooms that teaches children those emotional development skills that might be useful to them, and also goes along with just generally teaching them emotional intelligence skills. You can also see that there's the graphic to the right of this slide, just some nice, basic, simple tips to be able to follow. So being calm yourself, making sure that you're offering children predictable routines, clear boundaries, knowing lots of feeling words and using them and helping children to use them. So some good tips overall to help children with their emotional development and regulation. More and more you hear about emotional intelligence, this idea that we don't just want to be book smart, cognitive smart, we also need to be emotionally smart so that we can manage ourselves and interact well with others in our environment around us. So I just wanted to give a little bit of information about this. So the definition of emotional intelligence, as you can see in bullet 1, is being able to identify, assess, and control one's own emotions. So this would be that understanding, expression, and regulation of ourselves and others, and that of groups of people around us. So it is, like I just said, it's emotional understanding. It's the cognitive component of emotions, so knowing what emotions mean, how to process them, and then we're combining that with the ability to have good emotional expression and good emotional regulation, which are the behavioral components. And we do know that when children have higher emotional intelligence, when they're better at regulating, when they're better at expressing, when they're better at understanding, that is linked to good developmental outcomes. So better able to pay attention, more engaged in school, more positive relationships, more empathic. And these kids also tend to regulate their behaviors better and earn higher grades. So all kinds of good developmental benefits from having those emotional development skills or having what is referred to as emotional intelligence. I wanted to finish up this lecture by talking about the Ruler program. So this is a program that directly socializes children about different aspects of emotional intelligence. So it helps children to recognize emotions, to understand the causes and consequences of emotions, how to label emotions, how to express emotions that are appropriate for time, place, and culture, and how to regulate emotions. So there are various teaching tools that early childhood educators can use to help children to develop these skills. I would encourage you to look at the article, the link that's provided on this slide from NAEYC. It gives you some specifics about what teachers in the Ruler program do to help children to develop these skills. One of them is called the mood meter. So it is a box that has 4 different colors, and basically children can point at one of the squares on the box to identify what it is they're feeling. Are they having hot emotions? Are they having cooler emotions? Are they feeling upset or happy or mad? Any one of the feelings that they're feeling, because it's very important for children to have tangible tools to be able to help them understand emotions and to be able to express emotions appropriately. And so Ruler has a lot of these great tools and strategies to more directly teach children the skills that are needed to be emotionally intelligent.